Welcome everyone to the Great Lakes Permaculture Design Collaborative.
We are a trio of permaculturists.
Rhonda Baird from Bloomington, Indiana.
William Faith from Chicago, Illinois.
Milton Dixon from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
We're teaming up to create a hands-on learning experience
that can catapult you into a regenerative practice of your own.
GLPDC.info
will send you to the host of our next Permaculture Design Certificate course.
So welcome everyone to the GLPDC Great Lakes Permaculture Design Collaborative. This is the three of us, me, Milton Dixon, William Faith, and Rhonda Baird. And we have teamed up. We put on a PDC in Chicago, and our next project is to put one on in Ann Arbor. So this is kind of an outgrowth of that. And as I said before, this is going to be kind of a high level, what is permaculture presentation, and we'll see what grows from that. But first, just a little about myself. I'm Milton Dixon. I kind of discovered permaculture in Chicago and met William there. But then more recently, I've moved from Chicago to Ann Arbor. And now I'm kind of trying to figure out what I'm doing here in Ann Arbor. I'm lucky enough that basically my wife supports me, and I can kind of exercise the other aspects of my life that aren't specifically job related, and try to leverage those into some sort of coherent permaculture whole. So that's the quick about me. I have, you see my son back there, and you'll see maybe other kids go by. I had a friend come over, and she is hanging out with my 4-year-old son and my 9-month-old son. And yeah, because today is a snow day. It is snowy in Ann Arbor. We had about 11 inches over the course of past 24 hours. So, William, would you go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'm William. I'm here in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm a transplant originally from Los Angeles. I've been here about 6 years. That is where I met Milton. And Milton at the time was organizing the Chicago Permaculture Meetup, and I sort of took the baton from him when he head to Ann Arbor, and then also with Rhonda, I'm on the board of the pardon me, Great Lakes, Great Rivers and Lakes Permaculture Institute, which is a regional hub of the Permaculture Institute of North America, which is a national organization which is supporting professional permaculture development. And as Milton mentioned, the three of us did a permaculture design course here in Chicago this past year, and which went really, really well. And so we're very excited to bring this to Ann Arbor and moving forward from there. So that is me. Ms. Rhonda?
Awesome. So my name is Rhonda Baird, and I live in Bloomington, Indiana. And I have been studying and teaching permaculture for the last 11 years, mostly over the Midwest. And I have a 1/4-acre residential site that is in development, as sites are. And I have a design business and have done design work over a number of scales. And I teach, do design work, and then work for Permaculture Design Magazine, and work with different permaculture nonprofits, permaculture-based nonprofits. And I really enjoy working with Milton and William because we're looking at sort of pushing the edge of permaculture design education in a way. And so we've done a really successful, unusual course in Chicago and hope to repeat it successfully.
All right. So let's take a little tour through this slideshow, and then we can open up for questions. It should be really short. So And the first thing we want to go over is, what is permaculture? It tends to be, I think, in a lot of people's minds, a really nebulous thing. Some people think, oh, it's advanced gardening. It's the definition, kind of the quick definition that I've settled on is sustainable design. And get down, my goodness. And so a quick definition of sustainable design. But I've even, as I've kind of continued my personal journey, I'm really seeing it as two primary things, that we're increasing our awareness about what is going on around us, where our food comes from, the environmental degradation that may or may not be going on around us, and our effect on that. And then improving our process, so we actually get better at making more well-rounded decisions, more thoughtful and better decisions. And that to me is what's permaculture. You guys want to take a stab at it? Rhonda? Oh, William, go William.
For me, just my nutshell synopsis is designing sustainable human systems and habitats, and which is, usually opens up another 100 questions off the back of it. But and in essence, that's kind of what you want, because it's very, very difficult to nutshell or pigeonhole. I think Rob Hopkins famously said that, anytime you start talking about permaculture, it usually involves pulling out a pad of paper and drawing pictures of chickens, and so it's very, very difficult to define. But for me, I think sustainable human systems and habitats is about as simple as I can make it. And the thing that I always try to bring to the front in any discussion about it is bringing it out beyond land-based design and beyond simple gardening, that there's so much more to it. I always, as we get into this, I'll kind of make the point probably a few times that I think the larger part of permaculture is actually social systems and social design, because a lot of the things that I think cause a lot of our best efforts to fail is the fact that we don't focus on the human component. And permaculture really has a lot of utility in that area, so I really try to make sure that gets mentioned, because I think a lot of people will think about, oh yeah, there's agroforestry, or it's organic gardening, or it's water catchment. It's focused around very sustainable elemental design, but not really focused on people so much. So I always make sure that that's in there. Ms. Rhonda?
I think for my part, the simplest definition is working with nature. And I like that because there are a lot of ways that plays out. And like William, I have my things I like to highlight. And so to echo what William said, permaculture is defined as it's a clunky word that combines permanent and agriculture, this idea of creating a permanent agriculture that can be regenerative, not just sustainable. And that's where it started, as a critique of the Green Revolution. And then it has also this connotation of permanent culture, because we can't create this oxymoron, permanent agriculture or culture, which is fluid, without addressing how we engage our social dynamics. And the other thing that I want to say, that where people get confused, is it a network? Yes, it's a network of people. Is it gardening? Yes. Is it communities? Yes. But ultimately, the thing that holds it all together is the design system and process. So there's a lot of different people engaged with permaculture, and that's a great thing, actually, because that's one of the secrets to resilience. So yeah, you can find a lot of different definitions out there.
All right, let's move on. So permaculture, really the core of it is the three ethics of permaculture, and they're I like to say them as care of the earth, care of people, and care for the future. It gets stated a couple different ways: share the surplus, redistributing back to nature. I get a little fuzzy on those, but I think it's more succinct to say care for the future, and I think it fits the pattern of the earth care, people care, future care. And what it's doing is it's saying that, without the earth, we don't exist. Without people don't exist. And we want those two things to go on into the future. And so how do we do that? And it's a metric. It's a way of saying we can evaluate something. You get your box of Kraft macaroni and cheese and you say, well, does this take care of the earth? Does this take care of the people? And will it last into the future? And then you can make your decisions and either put it in your shopping cart or put it back on the shelf. So that's how I think of the ethics. Rhonda, would you like to go next? Just switch things up a little bit.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think you just said it beautifully, actually. I don't have much to add except to say that the ethics, or emphasize that the ethics are the core of when you evaluate, is someone actually practicing permaculture? Have they really taken those ethics to heart? And how are they practicing each of them? William, do you want to add in?
Just to sort of perhaps reiterate in a different voice, but for me, I always bring it back to these three ethics in any decision that's being made. And I also say that absent any one of these ethics, it isn't permaculture. So if any decision that you've made does not represent all three of these, if one of them is missing, it simply isn't permaculture. This needs to be, this is really what holds, that's the glue that holds the whole thing together. This is the basis for any decision. Any design decision is the ethical basis that keeps us together. This is what separates permaculture from things like landscape architecture or other systems of design, is specifically the ethical basis of it. So I kind of beat it into the ground, but I think it's central to the whole thing.
I'd also like to point out that seeing where we are in time, what systems, what is around us, it's hard to get this pure, always take care of all three. And we're really looking for a directional approach that we're going towards that. And I really hope that we can always get all three all the time. And until then, we're going to do the best we can. So the next slide then. So from the principles, from the ethics, we have the principles. I see the principles as patterns in nature. Patterns of sustainable systems is another way to describe it. These 12 here, it was designed by David Holmgren, who's one of the co-originators of permaculture. And this is just one iteration of the principles of permaculture. You can often see, Mollison, I think, has like 27. You'll see some from Rosemary Morrow or different people. And largely they're the same thing. I think there was a lot of care put into these and thought, and some good things that came out of that. For example, it's arranged in a clock pattern, which is very common. Most people have clocks around. I'm looking at one, and even on my computer here, I have an analog clock showing me what time it is. And the icons, the pictures, aiding in the memorization and remembering of the different patterns. I'm gonna just blast through them real quick, or maybe I'll do the first few and hand them off. So starting with the tree. That's observe and interact, 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock is catch and store energy. 3 o'clock is obtain a yield. 4 o'clock is accept system feedback. And can I pass them off to you guys, or are you ready to do it from the icons, or I'll keep going? All right. So we have use and value renewable resources and services at 5. Number 6, 6 o'clock is produce no waste. 7 is patterns to details. 8 is integrate rather than segregate. 9 is small and slow solutions. 10 is I'm gonna have a brain fart here. 10 is go for it.
I was going to say, well, it's a good challenge. Diversity, appreciating diversity.
Oh yeah, use and value diversity. Oh my goodness, forgot that one. But good thing that we have a diversity of teachers here, people that know permaculture, so that we can always remember all the principles. The next one, 11 o'clock, is use edges and value the marginal. And number 12 o'clock is creatively use and respond to change. That's my personal favorite, because change is always there. So you have some comments, Rhonda, since you saved my rear there?
Well, I was just going to say, so these practices emerged, from Holmgren's thinking of and thought about the system for a long time. And actually, if you start with the first one and work through to the 12th one, they become a practice of permaculture, an approach to how you respond to anything, to any kind of change. And I also just wanted to point out that I put the link to his website in the chat so people can reference that later.
It's a good resource.
And then with respect to the principles, something that I always try to point out is rather than viewing these as this very sort of dogmatic kind of thing, they're actually thinking tools, and they apply to just about any area of your life. I bring it back to permaculture kind of being a lens that you see the world through. And so these are applicable, in the garden, they're applicable in social systems. They apply to your interactions. And in some cases, I mean, you can get very creative with them, and they still maintain most of their utility, and they're very useful. Milton, something that Milton had said prior to this in some primers that we've done together is that, again, it's how you think of it. We have the one with the radish with the bite taken out of it, that's obtain a yield. And when we done a primer, Milton kind of said, well, what's your yield today? Maybe it's information. And so that's what you're taking away from it. So that's kind of what we're how we use these things. They're thinking tools.
Yeah, another example of that particular principle, one of my teachers and mentors said, you will be practicing permaculture if you just try to harvest something every day. So yeah. That's a great way to start. I think about Kirsten, you said you were gardening, and that's the first piece of it, right? But yields aren't just food, they're energy, connection, information, all kinds of things.
All right, so let's move on. There was a question, and Steve, is it okay if we hold it till the end? We'll come back to it. I think we can do that okay. All right. So next we have the permaculture flower. So you notice that in the middle of the permaculture flower is the ethics and then the principles, and then leading out to the permaculture flower. My thinking on this has pretty radically transformed over the time that I've been studying it, which is a good thing, right? It's maturing perhaps, and seeing this as a way to look at anything that we do. It's going to have aspects that touch on all these petals of the flower. They're called domains. And so, if you have a garden, right, there's a building aspect of the garden, building beds. Maybe you build a fence around it. You're going to use certain tools and technology. The magic technology of the shovel is what would you do without a shovel, right, in a garden? And to jump back, perhaps the land and nature stewardship. If you're gardening, if you take care of the land, first of all you have to have a place to garden in the land, and then if you want to expect to garden for any length of time beyond the current year, you're going to have to steward that land in multiple different ways. But then moving on, those are kind of the very visible ways that the flower manifests. But in a garden, there's a certain education and culture about how you create the garden. Perhaps what plants you plant, what plants are accepted. Tomatoes were considered poisonous for a long time, or whether you plant the garden in straight rows or not is an aspect of the cultural view of how a garden should manifest. Your health and spiritual well-being, eating from the garden can help keep you healthy, but it can be a rejuvenating place, help your spiritual well-being, just spending time in a garden. The finances and economics, planting a garden costs money and it saves you money. You might sell the produce from your garden. There's lots of different ways that can manifest. And then finally, the land tenure and community governance. Basically, what structure allows you to garden in a certain place? Is it that you own the property? Is it that you have participated in an allotment? So you're working with others to kind of garden in a space, or is it that it's a guerrilla garden that you're not supposed to have the garden there? All of those are going to affect the garden, and making sure that you're working the ethics and the principles through all of these aspects of the garden is important. Would one of you like to? I talked a lot, so
I'll jump in here. It's kind of restating a point that was made earlier. But if you look at the petals on the flower, there's 7 petals in total, and I always point to the only things that are specifically tactile or land-based are the land and nature stewardship, building tools, and technology. So once you move beyond that, you'll notice that the other 4 are basically social in nature. So I always make the point that there's 4 social petals and about 3 land-based petals. So that's, for me, is kind of restating that case that permaculture is more about social interaction and the way that we work together than specifically the gardening thing. So that's kind of where I try to move beyond that.
Rhonda, anything to add? Don't forget to.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it really well. The point here is that permaculture design addresses so many different aspects of life and social life. And, I think I just want to clarify and make a point that we can start our education with permaculture and really jump on YouTube and look at all the free blogs and all that stuff. We can get really take things out of context. We get bits and pieces of knowledge, but we don't know how to connect them. And so really what we've been doing is building up layer by layer through the ethics principles and now these domains, how permaculture is really after looking at systems and how they're connected and how they evolve. And so it's not just that you know how to garden or how to build a bed or great passive solar design for a house, but that you put these things in relationship so that the whole system becomes more efficient. So yeah, that's kind of what we're after here. All right, Milton, take it away.
All right. So just real quickly, it's a big, long list. You guys can, if you're watching afterwards, you can pause it, or we will have a video up so you, again, can pause it and look at this giant list. These are all the topics that we're going to cover in a permaculture design course that we're running. And the principles, the ethics, the principles, and the flower apply to each one of these. And there's a lot there. Then you start working through all that, and it really blows up into just essentially a big project. A lot to do. And I think about this in terms of my life. I still got a lot a lot of room to go with all of these personally, let alone someone who's just starting out. So any comments on this slide, friends?
Yeah, I think for me, this is the blueprint of basically what we teach during the course, and it's a 72-hour curriculum, and we go beyond that in the course itself, and it's a lot. It's a huge brain dump. I've heard it referred to somewhat accurately as trying to drink from a fire hose, but the way that we've staged this and the way that we're putting it across now allows for a much deeper dive into these topics than a conventional permaculture design course, because we don't really focus very heavily on lecture. A lot of the information is front-loaded, and we have a very specific design that was spearheaded by Milton for the way that we dispense the course. And so we really had great success getting all this information in there. And I think our students that came out of the last course, I think, have a much more nuanced understanding of a lot of these topics than would normally be expected.
Rhonda?
No, I don't really think I have anything productive to add.
Okay, that's fair. Let's go on to the next slide. So we talked about, permaculture in terms of, or I mentioned that it's awareness and design, right? It's these two things. That's my view of it. And so, the picture on the left here, we have some students from our last class. They were able to draw on the wall, so an example of one of their designs that they put up on the wall. They were able to go through them quickly, over and over again, different examples, and kind of get to the nitty gritty of what's important. You can go into a lot of detail in a design and what's possible, and it's really easy to put things that are not appropriate. And so how do you tease out the what it really is appropriate in an instance? And that's something we do in the design course. On the right is just an example design I did for someone. I just a quick walk of the property and looking for where can they really make a change in their lives by just doing one or two very specific things. And I think that's everyone's life is different, and everyone's I live in a condo. I do not have land myself to play with, and so what I do is going to be different than what this person does who lives in this house. To take a step forward. And that's what we're looking to do. In the bottom right, I have something I came up with, the iterative design process, just trying to look at the way that we make decisions in the first place and to kind of hone in on that and make a design process that is very, very similar to that. We make a decision based on what we know. And just so giving us a tool to do that more easily and just a little more planfully, looking at what's available and what's going on and moving from there. William, Rhonda?
Sure. When we get to design, that's really where the rubber hits the road in permaculture, and that's where it starts getting really fun. You're getting away from these very high-minded concepts and theories. Well, I mean, you're applying them, but this is where you get to flex your creative muscle. And I've always said that permaculture is equal parts art and science. And this is where you kind of get out there and get in the landscape and start playing with it. Landscape being both figurative and literal. And in this case, the thing I love about permaculture is that you can give a design opportunity to the same design opportunity rather to two different designers, and what you get back will usually vary greatly between the two designers. You'll never get the same design out of two people, and that's the fun part for me, is that you get out there and everyone sees something different. They focus on different things. They bring different things to the fore. They connect things differently. The outcome is always going to change. And so I love that about this. That's one of the things that really kind of caught my attention very early on.
Yeah, I'll add to that, we've seen design process, the basic design process, and there are different frameworks for how that gets applied, but I could say you can use it to do everything from organize your kitchen all the way up to regional planning. So it has a very broad application, and yet because it's grounded in those principles and ethics, you get very similar results, even despite how we all solve problems differently. And I've taught 5-year-olds design process, and they're very creative, and all the way up to 77, I think, is the oldest student I've had. So the permaculture design process appeals to people from a wide range of experiences and interests.
All right. I have to say, Steve, you got me there. I clicked on that link, and I didn't realize that I was sharing the screen, and oh boy. So anyway, the next slide here. So we thought we'd have 3 examples of permaculture, kind of focusing on care of the earth, care of people, and care of the future. So this first one, this is a friend of mine's. His name is Bryce Ruddock. He lives in South Milwaukee, and he has an amazing, amazing city lot. He has been working on it for 30 plus years. And the picture on the left is actually where that lot started, which is a standard, no fence, no, just lawn and maybe a tree or two. And it has gone from that to just, it's all these little spaces. It's all sorts of things going on, interacting, strengthening each other, essentially. For example, in this middle picture, you see his garden just top of the house. The water off of his garage in the back zigzags down through the garden and then goes out into the other areas. So all that water, which is quite a bit, is first working its way through his garden and watering what plants he has there. He's got wild rice growing in one of the ponds. All sorts of different spaces and ecosystems, places for people, places for animals. In addition to these places for plants, right? Garden plants, forest plants, and it's a really wonderful place to be. And he's a pretty amazing person. He knows, he'll take you on a tour from the front door around to the alley. I think there was like 300 different plants, and he knows the name and the Latin for all of them. He is really an amazing person. So, did you? You're unmuted. Did you want to jump in on something?
Oh, I did not realize I was. But no, fantastic design. Bryce does amazing work. So this is just a really, really good example. And yes, indeed, the sort of zigzagging diversion ditch through his property. I mean, it's just capturing all that water as it runs through. It's just capturing passive flow. Very, very simple thing, but also very effective. Good design.
I want to add just we're again very focused on the landscape, the planting, the passive capture of water is a great example of permaculture design and practice there, where we're maximizing yield and benefit while minimizing our efforts. So we put something in place one time, and then we continue to harvest over a period of time. What you don't see, but is likely, and I don't know Bryce's place as well, is that also a practicing permaculturist will be paying attention to how to maximize efficiency in the built structures, so that there's minimal energy usage, water conservation, that kind of thinking, and also creating productive places inside the household for processing things that are created and produced on site. So that's a part of it, which we don't always see, and it's not as exciting sometimes, like come see my pantry, but that's a part of it. So it can be really exciting and fun aspect of permaculture.
Excellent. This next one, care of people, is really what I'm thinking about here. So we have City Repair, which is a project in Oregon, I believe. Is it Portland? And they are this specific thing. They're calling it intersection repair, where they're changing the nature of these residential intersections so that they feed the community rather than pull from the community. I think one of the things that was going on was people were just zooming right through an intersection, and this crazy painting on the pavement actually makes people slow down and go, "Oh my gosh, what is going on here?" And creates a safer space for the people to then inhabit that. And there's all sorts of other things that go on. This is just a single picture. Another thing is actually a permaculture project that one of my students came up with. It's called the Free Box. She's an artist, and it's essentially a curated space with things that are free. If you need, your kid needs a toy, well, they're here. If you need a winter coat, they're here. It's just one view of what's there, but it's interacting. It's kind of interacting with the social structures, interacting with the social realm, and very much permaculture. Looking at the environment around you and kind of connecting to that, what it's needed in that to make it a healthier space. Right, both of these examples. Rhonda or William, you want to jump in?
I'd say some of the additional function of these city repair intersection projects is they do have stuff exactly like a sort of gift box thing on the corner where they'll have like a gift library where people will put books in there, and you're free to take those books, take them home, read them, bring them back. If you have a book to contribute, pop one in there. And then also it serves as a funnel for social connection as well. So the fact that they're building a sort of visual representation of beauty into the place, and then adding these additional functions, it also attracts people. So there's a lot more social cohesion and interaction rather than the kind of more standard urban and suburban methodology where you kind of avoid eye contact with your neighbors going out to pick up the mail. This is something that's trying to bring back that sort of social glue, that community glue that's so urgently missing in a lot of our interactions these days.
Yeah, I'll just sort of reiterate permaculture design because of its ethical basis, and it has this balance between the earth care and the people care, and this. When we get into larger community design, permaculture has a lot to say about creating opportunity through design process for interaction and building the social glue that William was talking about, and encouraging what I would call true governance and democracy, actually, because people know each other. They can actually make grounded decisions that will perpetuate into the future. So so I actually came to permaculture not so much through the plant part of it, but through the social part of it, and find this part really exciting. All right, Milton.
Yes. So let's keep moving. Time is ticking away. This last example is from Hope in a Changing Climate. It's a video. You should be able to find it on the internet if you're interested. But this specifically is the Loose Plateau. That is basically desertifying. It was turning into a desert based on the practices that the local people were having on it. And this is the headwaters for the Yellow River. And so, with governmental support, what they did is massive transformation project, and really using only human labor, which makes it even more amazing. But to go from what's on the left, this kind of dry desert area, to make it a very lush space. John D. Liu. I think, I don't know if you're all aware, but it's been said that wherever man walks, he leaves deserts in his footprints, something along those lines. The Fertile Crescent was fertile at one point, and now it's essentially a desert. The earliest stories that we have, specifically Gilgamesh, talks about cedar forests in the Middle East. They are not cedar forests anymore. They have been all chopped down to build whatever. It's long gone now, and basically all that's left are the deserts.
Yeah. There's also. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so to me, this is one of the most promising things, because we're after not just sustainability or growing a few veggies, but actually these broad scale projects that can do some amazing things for the planet and for people. I mean, that earth care is also people care, is also care of the future. So we're not just after sustainability. That's kind of so, but regenerating landscapes and creating more abundance. And so to me, this is the ultimate goal. And we see this in work like Eric Tainsmeyer's carbon farming solution. If someone wants to see, a larger scale text and research project, and that's specifically written for policymakers, but also for designers and farmers. So that's a good reference. I'll put that in the chat.
And yeah, this is, for me, this is the most, I think, inspiring before after shot I think I've ever encountered, where it shows something that was completely eroded by, poorly managed animal agriculture and short-term gains, and completely desertified and created all this erosion and this cascading effects of, all the silt of the hillside was just washing down into the river and creating these big thick mud mats that became a tourist attraction in the saddest of ways. And then this was, through just some very, very careful and thoughtful design, they were able to completely restore this area. And a lot of this was done with hand tools. So it was a massive social effort as well. And people were very invested in it when they found that they would have, they would be able to, they would have ownership and governance of that specific area. So this is, to my mind, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and Rhonda Milton, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the largest scale effort I've seen taken on and installed. And it's incredible and very heartening to see this kind of thing. Just very, very, very inspiring.
Well, I think it also speaks to what is possible if we could manage something like this on an even larger scale. If you're worried about climate change, this is a potential solution.
I do want to, put things in perspective, though. Permaculturists tend to advocate organizing on the personal level and then out into the neighborhood and community. And then when you have excess energy, then going out into the broader regional landscape. And then, so these projects, they're built, but they're built off of, hopefully, coming from a place of personal strength. Right.
Well, ideally, we would start with each individual and work out from there, right? Our last slide is shameless promotion. We are holding a permaculture design course, actually not in Ann Arbor, but in Ypsilanti Township. It's at Dawn Farm, which is part of a project that I'm involved in to actually steward the land. 6 weekends, and in 2017. And we hope that you all can join us. Hope that you're interested, because the last one was really an amazing course. But should we answer some of these questions? So the the one that Steve asked, it seems people are missing from the practices. And he says, I must not understand. And the original 3 people are a priority. Any clarity to my confusion is appreciated.
If I understood correctly, I think that question popped in during the principles, because during the ethics, I mean, people care is one of the ethics, so it's central to that. And I would think that really, if you thought people were missing in the principles, I mean, these are applicable to literally anything. So people are, to my mind, intrinsic. Explicit in the design, in any design consideration, because all designs that we're talking about are ultimately fashioned by people, and people care being one of the ethics. It's central to our designs. So people are, and I always, like I said, I describe permaculture as regenerative human systems and habitats. So being that we're kind of the keystone species at this point on the planet, it offers us a opportunity to behave like it, and all the responsibilities that entails. So that's sort of my spin on it.
Hey, Rhonda.
Well, I would say when you look at those 12 principles, the first 6 are based off of they're human. It's you as an agent, you as an action person, putting these things into play. But the first 6 mimic natural processes and things that happen in nature. The human enters in about the 6th principle and moves on around in terms of human response to change. And this mimicking, you could take any of the principles and apply them in a way that takes the ethics. So to me, for example, marginalized people, like working with the edges, or that could be an economic edge by occupying and trying something new in a part of town that is an economic margin. And we saw, a bad example in the fire in Oakland, but there are a lot of good examples that, happening as well. So now that's getting attention, but people tend to do that. And so greater permaculture ethics would be to do the people care piece, so that those people in those edges that are doing those creative things are better taken care of.
Yeah, I would just say that ethics are primary, and the principles are kind of a subset of that, or they are ways to take care of people, take care of the earth, take care of people, and take care of the future through those actions. So you're not really losing them when you stop talking about people. They're kind of present in the ethics from the get-go. So that's my perspective. Kristen was wondering about the history of permaculture. And I know Rhonda mentioned it as a reaction to the Green Revolution. Does anyone want to field this one? Or?
Well, I can take it. And I don't want to lose the Living Building Challenge too, because I know a little bit about that. But so permaculture essentially is the design process, and the way that it's been handed down is it's the brainchild of Bill Mollison, who just passed in this fall, and he in the late 60s, early 70s was in academics and looking at the sort of confluence of science and indigenous practices in Australia and New Zealand, and some of these other things, and he was mulling this over. And then he met up with a young grad student, David Holmgren, who was really influenced by the work of Howard Odum and his concepts around systems and systems thinking, which was really emerging and dominant in the different fields at that time. So these two pulled it all together and started publishing. And Mollison, being at a different place in his life and with certain vision for permaculture, took off around the world and began implementing projects, teaching courses, Originally, the permaculture design course was 3 weeks, and the first week was Bill Mollison trying to convince people that there were problems that were going to emerge, like at that time they were calling it global warming. And they were critiquing the industrial use of machinery and technology to create or to transition people away from their traditional practices, agricultural practices, toward a grain-based, getting people enough calories kind of thinking. And so that export thought around nutrition and providing for billions of people on the planet was critiqued by permaculture with this new synthesis. I can take that in a lot of different directions, but Mollison basically established permaculture concepts on all the different continents, demonstration sites. There's actually going to be an international convergence next November, December in India at one of the sites that Mollison, I think that will be going to some of the sites that Mollison helped establish. And so the permaculture network came out of that. All right, I can go on, but I won't.
Do you want to hit the living building challenge?
So the living building challenge is parallel. I have students who are architects and builders who have engaged with the living building challenge, and there are connections, but it's not explicitly the same group of people that are taking both up. There are connections with that, and that's about all I can say. For the people who don't know what that is, it's essentially a design process and system that has the same ethical stringency, I would say, as permaculture, maybe even more sometimes in terms of what you can build on, what you can't, and what the rules are. But it's more stringent than LEED, aligned with permaculture. And it also, besides building structures, has developed a certification for living products that business owners and can engage with if they're producing something. So there's some really good parallels.
Should we address the global engagement a little bit? I know that there's some pretty strong permaculture, of course, in Australia, where it originated from. I think there's a worldwide presence. There's some kind of cross-pollination, like in Japan and Masanobu Fukuoka. Before Bill Mollison knew about his methods for growing grain and in I guess a sustainable, regenerative way, that he didn't think it was possible to grow grain in the first place, in a manner that takes care of a place. It's all over the place. There's permaculture projects in South America, every continent, I suppose, except Antarctica, right? I'm kind of shooting at the hip here.
Well, I can jump in and say that when I first took the permaculture course in 2005, I went to the Continental Bioregional Congress, which had people from South America, up to Toronto. And the South Americans were like, you're all new in permaculture, like come down here to Brazil or Ecuador, wherever they were from, and cut your teeth on permaculture projects because we're doing some really exciting work, because the US isn't ready for permaculture. And actually that's changed. Fortunately, I'm glad to say that's shifted a lot in the last decade, but there are strong centers of permaculture in South America, in Thailand, in India, in France and Britain. Both have strong centers from which institutes and collective projects have emerged. So, and Australia is where it originated, so it has a very strong presence in Australia. But it's sort of everywhere. It's doing some pretty fascinating work.
I just got back from Bali, where I visited 3 different permaculture sites while I was there, and it was incredible, amazing efforts. So yeah, it's there's no corner of the globe that it hasn't reached. It's only degrees of penetration, really. And then picking up on the next one, regarding alternative means of trade in a permaculture community outside the dollar. There's one of the things that we talk about when we get into invisible or social structures is, yeah, exactly that. Other ways of trading. So something that you'll see is alternative currencies, things that exist alongside existing currencies. Transition towns have kind of pioneered a lot of that work. It's the work of Rob Hopkins, who is himself a permaculture designer who, to my mind, is the first person to develop a 2-year university-level curriculum for permaculture that he was teaching. And so it was based in Britain. So a lot of the initial efforts are there, but it certainly has made its way over here as well. But my favorite example is in Brixton. In England, they have what they call the Brixton pound, which exists alongside pound sterling, but their 10-pound note has David Bowie on it, which I think is awesome. And another thing in Totnes, which is a very small English community, I think it's 7,000 people, but they created a Totnes pound, a 21-pound note, just because they can, just why not? So they did a 21-pound note. And then beyond that, there's things like time banking and let systems and things like that are time banking, which is where an hour of labor, regardless of skill level, just whatever the effort is, it's 1 hour of labor traded straight across for another hour. Be that skilled labor, if you're a doctor, or if you're a plumber, versus unskilled labor. So whatever degree of effort you care to put in, it's an hour traded straight across. And those are just a few examples. There are others as well.
And I'd like to point out real quick that there are time banks both here in Ann Arbor and in Ypsilanti. So great place to get to participate in and kind of get your feet wet. I would say too that the transition towns, there is a whole book on alternative currencies and how hard they are to implement and what's required. And also we're kind of trapped at this point, at least where we are with the almighty dollar. There's going to be a lot that we can't get away from with that, even as we try to experiment with some other alternative ways.
Well, and we can talk about in different strategies. So there's time. I see them as layers, interconnected layers in a cake of formal exchange process, where time banking is one layer. There's an intermediate between time banking and paper currency, alternative currencies, which is a LETS system, and that can combine the time bank with a currency process, and still allow for federal dollars to be collected to take care of things like taxes or child support or things like that. I think we all have some varying experiences with these systems, and I have experiences with them and other resources. So that's one thing. But I also wanted to add in, we address and go into in the course this concept of multiple forms of capital, different kinds of wealth, and sort of what we see as maybe a good approach to working with those different kinds of things. For people. So yeah. What other questions?
I was going to say that 8 forms of capital, there's some good information out there. Just a Google search will give you some really good stuff to chew on. And I highly recommend it. I think for me personally, it's one of the kind of permaculture tools, one of the permaculture tools that's required for any project. or any design. So
one of the things I love about 8 Forms of Capital is after once you kind of read through it, become familiar with it, you find that you're actually a lot better off than you thought you were before you started.
We do have some proto talks planned. Maybe William's going to come out here and do one live. My time availability is a little with the little kids is not always the best in terms of what other people can make, and so it doesn't necessarily make sense for me to do one at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Or we're also talking about having more of these online primers and kind of taking it further, maybe some different subject areas, or widening the scope of it. This I think was pretty basic. And
then Milton, you also run the meetup, right? The Washtenaw meetup.
Yeah. With the kids, it hasn't been super active. I've been trying to point out some different things that are going on. So whenever I have something going on, I post it up there. Or if I have friends that are doing something, try to get it up there too.
Any other questions?
Well, if we're going to close, sometimes I close with a one thing you've taken away from today, like an action item. Just to give everybody a minute to think about that, and maybe we can share that as part of our closing.
Us too? Oh no. I didn't know there was going to be a test.
Well, I guess I'll go first. I liked the whole flower diagram. I actually didn't get to write the whole thing down, so if you could go back to that slide, that would be helpful so I could finish writing that down. But I liked that you speak about permaculture as a combination of social change and social connection in addition to the actual physical stuff you need to do. So that's one thing I took away from it that I valued.
AJ, I popped the URL for Permaculture Principles in there, so you can click that link, and those earlier graphics are up there with more information if you can follow up on.
All right, thank you.
My takeaway is that I have a clearer understanding. And at the same time, I have a question in my own mind that I need to, my homework will be researching, because to me, it makes no sense to pursue a lot of efforts on these regards in the US, because yes, we could microscopically make a difference, but I think globally much of the rest of the world would be much more open and accommodating to the wonderful realities of this. And I feel like to continue to pursue this in the US, it's not highly profit producing, so that in US value systems, it's useless. Now, we know it's not, but we're a very, very, very minuscule portion of the population here. And I don't think the U.S. adopts anything of any consequence until they see it successfully going on somewhere else in the rest of the world, at least in this day and age. So I know this may sound cynical, but for me, it's like, why should we dig through concrete when I can maybe look at another place in the world, as you mentioned, France, as you mentioned, so many other, Bali, so many other places that are actually able to effect these changes. And I feel like in the U.S., it's pushing a rope up a hill. So that's my homework, is I got to figure out if it's going to be worth the effort here, the juice is worth the squeeze, or if I should, as I've been thinking, look other places in the world to engage.
I would say that it's probably most important that we start to transform our own spaces, connect with our local spaces. That it may not seem like we're going to get anywhere, but if the changes that are going to happen in the world that I understand are going to happen, if they actually do come down, we're going to be stuck. It's going to be local or nothing. And I think that we need to start transforming our places in whatever way we can. And I think permaculture helps us make decisions about that, and actually what is logical to transform or to work on and what is not. It may not make sense to transform your yard into a garden. You may not have the time for it. You may be able to get your food better from the grocery store or from your neighbors, or whatever that is, and maybe actually starting to create those ties with your neighbors might be more important ultimately, and more ultimately yield more value to you personally. But everyone's different too, so it really just depends.
I would just jump in on that as well, just to point out that I understand your perspective, Steve, and I hear you that it sometimes can seem very, very bleak in the U.S. landscape. However, even though we do appear to be crisis-driven, when push comes to shove, in times of energy descent and climate change and economic crisis and the other things that are kind of coming at us, the people that can make concrete differences in people's lives are going to be the ones that really have a great deal of value. As soon as you can connect to very core and basic needs and show a better way, and you have concrete examples on the ground, if you'll pardon the pun, things that actually make a difference, that can create change, that are functional, and that bring people together, that gather around things that are actually real, genuine human values. That's the stuff that makes a difference. That's the stuff that lasts. So I always come back to that. We tend to highlight our differences. We tend to focus on the things that drive us apart and become very polarizing, especially in this current climate. And I really feel you on that. But if you can really show something that works, something that is genuinely better and that speaks to our heart, and that is where I think our strengths really lie. That's my 2 cents. And I would also encourage you to look up different permaculture projects around the States to see what's actually happening on the ground.
I want to, Kirsten, are you still there?
I'm still here.
What's your takeaway?
I really like the conversation that just happened, actually. But as far as I'll go back to kind of to echoing what I think AJ had kind of pointed out. It was really fun for me to hear, the emphasis on the building of social relationships and almost the sort of pragmatic approach to what stewardship might mean that permaculture seems to take. I was thinking back, and I think the first sort of thing that I saw when I first heard about this sort of years ago was sort of a picture of, chickens in a rain barrel and sort of this self-sustaining ecosystem in a yard. And so that was sort of how I had my only sort of knowledge of this. So it was really fun to hear about these other aspects that I really connect with. So I think I'm really interested to do some more research and learning with regards to that stuff. But thank you so much for putting this on. It's really good.
And I would say to anyone watching in the future, the permaculture meetup, Washington Permaculture meetup is kind of the basis where this originated from, or where this was advertised to, essentially. And you can connect with me there if you have any questions or you want to talk more about permaculture. I do love to talk about permaculture for some reason. And also, of course, there'll be comments under the video when it gets posted, and post them there, and William and Rhonda and I will all be responding to them, and hopefully we will generate a lively conversation. So maybe thank you, everyone. We were supposed to only go for an hour, and here we are, nearly an hour and 20 minutes. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. And hope we'll see you all next time.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, guys. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
GLPDC.info
We'll send you to the host of our next
Permaculture Design Certificate course.